Before the bar is open, as it were. So this session is planned not just for us to give you some of our thoughts, but it's really to hopefully drag out some of your thoughts as well about the future. What's the future hold for libraries, academic libraries, and potentially other libraries as well? We don't necessarily have the answers. We have thoughts, but there are also, there are also changing trends, and I've spoken to a few of you about this. What's happened recently? How's that going to influence the future? What does that mean for the libraries? What does that mean for the students or the universities? So there are some key, what I would say is technology influences. So these are things that are happening now, and we looked at sort of digitalisation, and we know that there is a drive to provide the information in a format that the students or the library patrons, users, want to be able to consume it in. Now, one of the interesting things that came out of the pandemic is that people went back to physical books as well as digital content. So there was a drive. This what we thought was an unending drive to digitalise all print media actually has changed. So maybe it's a hybrid model as well. Are you experiencing that at all as well? Are you seeing drive towards books or drive towards online content, digital content, or both?
I think it's a mix. Sorry, I think for us it's a mix. I think we've been told for years digitised, but as you say, there's still people still want physical. So I think there's a mix. I think people want things digitised. They want the flexibility of both as well. As well, I say.
Yeah. Is that the feeling across the?
So I think it'd be a mix because sorry, I don't know if anybody else put their hand up. I think it's a mix because we have different, particularly from the university concept, you've got different setups. So you might have a very research-intensive university versus a teaching-led one, which is one I work for, where for research-intensive you might have quite a unique collection and collections that you need to protect. Whereas from the teaching side, you can be very kind of strategy-led. So our department will say we're E-first, But then even from the teaching side, the kind of teaching-led universities, you might have universities that have listened to their students, and as it stands, e-books aren't great. So and the way that you read e-books aren't great. So all students will say, I'd much rather read a physical book.
Okay.
So then you'll have, therefore, the institution might say, right, we've listened to we're going full book. But I think once you've resolved the poor experience, once the industry has resolved the poor experience that students have reading e-textbooks within library settings, then I think you'll quickly see a really, really quick transition back to E again.
Okay.
And in terms of my own opinion anyway. But
yeah. Go on, Dave.
Just kind of to add to that a little bit, we know from conversations with our students at Hallam that there is an appetite for both print and electronic. It tends to be dependent on the format of the resource. So the shorter pieces, journal articles and such, electronic is absolutely fine. For textbooks, there's a definite preference for print. But when you dig down a little bit into that and try and find out why, in part it's to do with the kind of the finicky nature of access to electronic text sometimes, some of which is licensing, some of which is to do with plugins and the like. And sometimes as well it can be to do with access to devices and the kind of, not liking to read on screen for a long time. I've had a couple of conversations with students who reported working on devices more during the pandemic and experiencing headaches where they haven't before and things like that. So there's quite a few different factors at play, I think.
And are you being asked to curate more than just, we talked about print media being digitalised, but are you curating streaming? So that's video content, music and that stuff as well, and how's that being consumed?
Poorly from our side. So we've got the canopies and everyone's got Bob, I'm sure, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But you'll often get students who say, I didn't even know that even exists. The library provides that. So I just use Netflix, or I set it online, or I download it illegally. We do a lot of UX, within our service with students, and they have no idea that we invest in some of this stuff.
Good. So that's sort of digitalisation. Then when we've looked at artificial intelligence. Now, I'm going to defer to, we've got two people who've got some reasonably strong opinions about, I know, Bolash, you have a strong opinion about artificial intelligence and what it actually is. Do you want to share that with us?
I don't really believe in artificial intelligence at the moment. The reason is because I think we cannot really measure intelligence to the extent that we need us to approach it appropriately. So who can tell whether a cat is dumber or smarter than a dog, or the other way around? And these things, so intelligence itself, to me, is not like, because I had a discussion about this with Simon, and I said, but it's about making decisions and stuff. Yeah, that's true, but I don't think that's intelligence in itself. And then what is it? So even who can really define it in a way that would give us the foundation to make artificial intelligence, when we can't even define it properly as a non-artificial intelligence. That's my view on it. So I think at the moment what we have is like rather clever ways of figuring things out, which is like, as someone put it, it's like smart statistics or sort of things like that.
Yeah. Because people often interpret artificial intelligence as all these algorithms that we're seeing being pushed around, and are they democratic in the way they create content for you? So are we seeing artificial intelligence applications being looked at by the libraries themselves?
It's like a resourcing to do things like that. We were talking earlier about developing apps and sort of retail experience that people have using Just Eat or Amazon and that kind of thing. So we've got users whose expectations are up here, and what we're able to deliver as a service is way off that. It's a quality service we deliver, but in terms of that interface, we just don't have the resources to be able to develop that kind of interface and selection that people might be expecting.
So can I ask, do you have ideas about where potentially you'd see it as an opportunity to improve the service, or is it something that just needs to be that understanding beforehand?
We can get that far at lunch, but thinking, for example, about the algorithms, things that might suggest you borrowed these books, would you be interested in these resources, or you've taken this book out, were you aware that we do this kind of online resource? That's more marketing, I think, than artificial intelligence. But in terms of apps, so the university, for example, is looking at another campus app, and it will look through a very narrow lens about how it might do that. So, for example, trying to get your space booking or your asset booking app integrated into that, or even part of the conversation, just the blinkers on some aspects of higher education is just enormous.
Yeah. So my experience of artificial intelligence from automation, and particularly from the Ocado work, is that we optimize our inventory constantly, and the artificial intelligence there, again, it's algorithms. The artificial intelligence there uses multiple sources, so it uses both the popularity of it, but it also uses other sources, like, for example, seasonal variations. It has a historical knowledge of seasonal variations. It taps into the BBC weather app and kind of goes, this weekend is going to be really lovely and sunny, lots of barbecue stuff is going to be sold. And so it brings them to the forefront. Now, does the collections within the libraries, are you guys looking at ways to optimize accessibility to those? Because I don't know how many you've got offsite storage of kind of lesser used items and things like that. Is that kind of things that you guys look at? Or is the kind of layout of the library predominantly dictated by experience and history?
Ooh, interesting question. But for us, we tend to supply the stock that we've got. We don't have, other than kind of archival material, we don't have a room store. So it's just laid out especially using jury. But in terms of highlighting students, you could be looking for
You might look for this textbook, but people who look for this textbook also look for this textbook, or this textbook isn't available. We recommend this textbook as an alternative. Those kind of things are kind of where AI is coming very, very keenly. Or looking at the length of time, the amount of popularity of X is. So actually maybe we need 3 volumes of that or 4 volumes of that. Going back on my history, I suspect there's times where particular if lecturers are still like they used to be. They used to kind of lecture the same thing year in, year out. So in February they recommend everybody read this book and everybody rushes off to the library to get that book. You can almost start predicting those kind of behaviours with artificial intelligence.
And with that sort of thing, Sue, you mentioned the problem over there of favourite places in the library and understanding that will that sort of thing help you with those problems?
I suppose it might allow us to extract data of, can we see any patterns around what are the favourites? What might influence a student to say it's a favourite? But I suspect it's fairly random and very personal. So I was thinking more the student would love it to be able to say that's my favourite, and therefore I want you to display information about those 4 spaces first or something. I think there's potential around AI with help and support. We've been thinking about how you engage with students initially, and we're seeing our face-to-face inquiries drop.
Really?
Sort of anecdotally, students want to engage with you digitally first, because that's a lot of their natural behaviour now, and that's where they start. So thinking about, I was actually talking to my son who'd come home, and even at 28 he gets grilled about this stuff when he comes home, bless him. And I sort of said, what would you find easier to engage? And he sort of said, well, we do live chat, but it's with staff sat the other end answering. And he said, I love the smart bulb thing. Now I hate them because they never quite get my question. But he said, but I like them. And he says, I think a lot of young people like them because they're really safe. You can ask the most stupid question in the world, and it's only a robot answering you. You can't be embarrassed.
Is the robot judging you?
There's no librarian sat in the back laughing. There's, it may be a valid point or not, but that had never occurred to me, that actually it was valued for the fact that it's entirely anonymous. Nobody's ever going to know. And certainly we have a lot of students who've given us feedback about being embarrassed about asking the question. And I thought, wow, okay, we've got to take it to the robot then, have we? But I thought there might be something there that we needed to start looking into.
Okay, I mean that's interesting, because we see that in young people coming into the workplace where they don't like making phone calls. They would rather the communication was, as you say, via a chat media or email, and the communication of last resort is a telephone. And face to face. Go on, Tom.
Just something that kind of off the back of the discussion just been had with AI. Something I've noticed, not only in my own institution but I think a bit wider, is there's a perception that AI is a very positive thing, such as the chatbots, such as for like data recommenders and things like that. But I think there's a bit of a disconnect between what perhaps colleagues working at a very senior level think we ought to be able to do, and actually the steps in between where we are now and there, which are in terms of like getting our sort of data, information and knowledge house in order really. Because the thing you need for AI in my experience, or kind of from what I've read, is really good knowledge management. And I don't think, and I think they need to be the other way around in the list. I think
this was in no particular order. This was a.
So I think from our perspective, I think we know we've got more to do with knowledge management before we can really think about sort of AI tools. I think would be where I'd stand on it.
Is there any focus on knowledge management and wanting to build up that, obviously, as a stepping stone. You know, if you're looking down the line, we want to do AI, but we need to put these things in place, or is it sort of, it's not on that sort of roadmap?
Yeah, you can see this from, I think, from the jobs being recruited to, and there are more posts, not in library services and places, but more like in like IT services and in kind of central directorates in higher education, of things called like knowledge lead and things like that. So I think there is an appetite for thinking about knowledge institution-wide, recognising that you've got pockets of knowledge that's just in people's brains, and that needs to be kind of like written down and standardised. And then also the fact you've got pockets of local knowledge that hasn't been standardised and shared beyond like individual like faculties, directorates, whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it's coming, but I think perhaps the thing, the staff who report directly to very senior managers need to remind their seniors of is actually these things have got to need to happen first and must be funded in order that we can get to the kind of the whizzy stuff. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think has anyone observed, like on LinkedIn or somewhere, it's putting you the question like saying, people like you follow this and that. What do you mean people like me? How do you compare me to others? You start to think about it, don't you?
But I didn't, but now I do.
Brilliant. So that's so artificial intelligence is definitely going to have a role to play at some point in the future, but I don't think we understand where that is, and you're still working it out. Is that a sensible view? Yeah. So we're just looking then at robotics, and what impact is robotics going to have on the library? And Brian, your recent background is heavily into robotics.
Yeah, so I think from my background, obviously automation is key on everybody's lips, and I come from one of the big automation kind of companies. One of the trends I saw the kind of five years as I was in there was cost trend in automation is dropping dramatically, and also the size of the automation infrastructure is getting smaller. So it used to be a case that, for automation to be useful, you need these big warehouses and things like this. Now we're getting to the point where automation is, places the size of this room, we can look at automation storage and retrieval of stuff, and you might have 4 floors and you might use 1 floor for an automated storage and retrieval area, and that ups your capacity greatly. And there's huge amounts of benefit to that, I think, but it depends on where people come from on that. I see a future where some reservations can be automatically retrieved and given to people and automatically returned. I don't know whether that's something you guys are seeing as a future trend or not.
So there's already been investment in what I would call early stage robotics here, hasn't there? So you've got sorters and automatic sorters.
We've reduced the size of our sorter when we bought our most recent one, and we've kept the sorter largely because we're a 24/7 environment. So I needed something that when library staff aren't there can sort items, that if I didn't have to worry about that, I would have seriously considered not buying a sorter at all. But then that's my institution. We're reducing the amount of book stock that we have, whereas somebody else might be completely different. But of course, we're also expanding loan periods. So the turnover of stock is becoming less and less. Fines being removed, all those things. So it's so robotics in that area for me and my institution wouldn't work out unless it was towards more things like security. Because my staff they don't tend to stay awake much during the day.
A little robot pole them every now and then.
Actually, that'd be a good idea.
Probably, in my opinion, looking from an external point of view, they're pretty one-dimensional in what they can do. And automation is not going that direction where you have one machine that can do everything. To do that, I would say if you look more like an automated shuttle system that will take a book and take a book as it's returned and put it back on a shelf or a storage location. Then when somebody goes to retrieve it, we'll retrieve it straight away. So it takes a lot of human interaction out of it. And I think if you're going to have automation, you want it to do multiple things for you. You don't want it just to take one step out of the chain. You want it to take, if not all the steps out of the chain, all painful steps out of the chain.
But you're probably talking of a collection there that's not a browsable collection, is it?
It wouldn't be browsable, no. And you might have, you know, for example, a good analogy is in pharmacies and hospitals today, they'll have all the drugs in a cabinet, and a little shuttle robot will pick up the drugs and come out and return them. If you think about a kind of reserve system, whereas, you know, one of the most popular reserve systems we have today is lockers, and somebody goes along and puts all the books in different lockers and somebody comes takes out. If you imagine a reserve system where you basically get all your reserve books, you drop them on a conveyor, the robot picks them up, puts them in particular locations, and when somebody comes along to get them, they type the card in and cover it and gives them it. And when they return the book, it returns it to any location or returns to the storage bin. So it acts as a sorter, acts as a reserve unit, acts, you know, takes some of the hassle away. You know, I think automation is best when it works in conjunction with people and takes some of the more boring tasks and mundane tasks away from them.
I mean, it might be a bit of a Luddite, but we find that people, even with all the automation and kind of reading lists, directing people where to look for stuff, people still like to browse. People, in a library, people still like to go to a bay of books and look through it. And it's
don't get me wrong, but, you know, we were in one of the libraries in London and it smelled of old books, and I love that. Yeah.
I think you might be onto something there then, because you could have a robot, because often you get, I'm looking for 658, and then where is it? So you, as a member of staff, you go and take ages, most of your day showing them, whereas you could have a robot that I suppose just takes them to the right part of the shelf.
That we would buy.
on those sorts of things, you could jump on one of those sorts of things and you could take you off the shelf.
Or you have the robot that does that you can control remotely to show you where the book is, so when you go in, you know the book's there type thing as well, so doing both.
I was just going to say, all of this is obviously really exciting from a technology point of view, but the thing I'm quite wary about, having started my career on help desks, is how we automate, or whether we can automate, the transactions that are not apparent at point of presentation. So the kind of like the noticing whether or not a student might be upset might require like a referral to the service, or actually, yes, we've dealt with their first query, but then how do we make sure the second one's picked up? How do we check that they're happy with what's being finished? So it's that kind of the element of interaction that is much harder to automate.
It's that dehumanisation, isn't it, of automation, as you're taking away that bit, and especially with students maybe suffering more mental health issues because of what we've just been through, and you can't see that, and you can't interact with them. You're right, yeah.
I think one of the best ways to look at that, though, is that being clever with the automation, taking away the mundane tasks that probably actually don't, taking away things that stop you from interacting with people. We talk a lot about books and retrieval and things like this, but, you know, you can imagine if, you know, I didn't have to return everything to a shelf, and there was a robot that did that for me. That gives you more time to interact with people.
But is it the point of, would there be that chance of interaction if they're not?
No, it's,
you know, that's the opportunity for the interaction.
And I think automation works well when you take away tasks that people either don't enjoy doing or that people aren't particularly good at doing, you know, kind of repetitive, mundane tasks. The interacting with somebody is something that automation can take away. Exactly to say, you know, no matter how clever your AI is, it's not going to read emotions, it's not going to read behavior. I know everybody says they can, but they can't.
Just you wait.
Yeah.
Our staff say that they get more inquiries when they're out shelving than they do standing down and inquiries.
Easier to approach when they're around there rather than across a desk. Yeah.
And also, I think I take your point about with automation, you're trying to look to you know, not just replace one step, but multiple steps and potentially a different approach to the whole transaction, whatever it is. But just thinking about, you know, getting books, replacing books. All our buildings are different, multiple floors, half floors. Oh no, that's not my space, you can't go in there. We're in this building this year, but now, oh, they're going to send us over there, and it's how much, and it's like when Sorters started, the amount of money you had to invest to get there, you know, was quite a barrier for a lot of places. Some of us decided, no, we're not going to go there for various reasons. Others did, and it worked really well for them. But, you know, those sort of huge investments in tech are, I think, even harder to get that investment now than it's ever been.
And automation has to be, any automation that we're going to look at has to be both scalable, so you can start off at a small investment, and that adaptable, that you can fit into exactly like multiple locations, multiple buildings. Some of them are brand new custom built buildings, some of them are hundreds of years old.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's figuring out what that technology systems look like. And I think you know, my personal thoughts is that you know, the combination of a reservation and return system with kind of sorter capabilities is probably one of the first elements of automation that will come in, and it will be reasonably priced.
But the other influence there, Sue, as well, is the one that you expressed earlier on, where actually what's the life cycle of this technology you're investing in as well.
Yeah.
So there's a huge capital investment. Are you going to realise the value of that investment over the life cycle? Suddenly there's a new toy to be had which replaces the old toy 2 years later type thing, yeah.
And that is a worry now. Just, you feel that, you know, COVID is going to speed up change even more now. We're on an even shorter cycle of going round and things are changing, and okay, we need to adapt to this now. So it just makes me wonder about our capacity to invest in big
capital items.
And from an investment point of view, I guess it's looking at it from, is it an improvement to customer service? Is it saving particularly like the staff overheads or the operations it's performing? And you know, clearly justifying that therefore an investment and weighing that up against the top net and technology benefits and the sort of soft skills and interaction.
One of the really interesting challenges is as I said, in my experience, automation as it becomes more ubiquitous, is the cost is dropping year on year. To get and perform that same feature or function is cheaper and easier to do in 2 years' time. So you could find yourself in a position where, are you going to be a technology leader and take a big hit, or are you going to just wait until somebody else does it, and then you know you get the same piece of kit for 20-30% less in 2 years' time.
But then with the risk that in 2 years' time someone else has already been developed, you've always did that sort of,
there's always
another 2 years.
There's always those early adopters.
It's like your iPhone, isn't it? You always want the next one, which is a year after you spent £1,000 on the one you've got already. Yeah. So I think what I'm very conscious of is time, as we're coming to, we've reached the close time. There are a couple more there which we've touched on initially with knowledge management, and I don't think the sort of automated knowledge management we're at that point yet, because intelligent search and automated knowledge management all link back to AI as well, the way we do it.
Possibly not at one stage. As in, I think what might need to happen in order to beef up our knowledge management that can then feed into AI is we need knowledge gathering at point of conversation.
Yeah.
So just thinking about in my own team, we often have a conversation about, oh, have we written that down? Could somebody do it if you weren't here? And so and as every busy team, you try and record what you can when you can, and according to a way that is easily shared and is not too jargon packed and is kind of according to a template that you've got. But I think for knowledge management to improve and it always to be a priority, it's got to be built into processes, and that's probably where it comes in earlier.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, knowledge management is a whole field in itself, let alone
AI engineers.
I don't know much about it, but you can see that You know, we're even now in our organisation, we've got email, Teams, and Teams has chats, but two different types of chat. You can chat around a team, or you've just got the general chat. And there's knowledge in all of that. And so you'll find yourself searching through email for, when I'm asking Daisy again for, you know, where can I find this? I've already been through badly through my email, through the general chat, through the team's individual chats and stuff like that. So that's a small example of the challenge you're talking about as well, yeah. Good.
And your point there about recording information and knowledge of individuals, there's many tiers to that as well, isn't there? Because sort of, well, who are you presenting that information to? You know, writing an instruction manual is a huge undertaking, and you've got to, you know, have you seen those videos where someone tries to explain what sort of how to open a jam jar?
Yeah.
And you know, it ends up being about 75 steps because you've got to explain, you know, all different hand movements and all this and the other, which sort of, as you're doing your day-to-day tasks, trying to add that into it as well is obviously a huge undertaking.
Maybe the intermediate AI we need is the manual that writes itself.
Well, that's next week's work, all right?
You might not want to read it. No, we got the general one.
Brilliant. Okay, so that really brings this session to a close. It was meant to just be a general conversation session. Hopefully we've achieved some of that. What we've talked about today doesn't necessarily mean this is what we're running around trying to sort out at the moment. It's about us getting, you know, starting to understand your challenges and influences and stuff like that. So thank you very much indeed for that. And thank you very much again for coming today. It's been a real pleasure to be able to stand up in front of a room and talk to people again. Absolutely. And I hope that you've all managed to get some good information today. And we will come around and talk to you now, because there is an opportunity now to go and have some drinks and some nibbles, some more food.
You can have a fossil as well.
So, but thank you very much indeed, and Nottingham, thank you very much indeed for hosting us again. Yeah, that's brilliant. And Dan, thank you very much indeed for that very good case study. Brilliant, thank you. Brilliant, thank you very much. Excellent.